لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الكريم أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Thank you, Sheikh Ibrahim, and first of all, thank you for inviting me. Sheikh Ibrahim honored me with an invitation as a guest presenter for one of the modules that will be coming up later on the Seerah, given my research in prophetic leadership and management. But after accepting that invitation, I then actually said, well, I might actually attend the whole course. It'll be useful revision for me as well. So inshallah, I'll also stay in that whole journey, not just for the Seerah module afterwards. Sheikh Ibrahim also asked me to give a few quick tips on time management. This is normally a one-day course. I'm going to attempt to present in 10 minutes, inshallah. It's a few thoughts I'm going to throw out there. And I think it's useful to think about ways to manage our time better, because if we want to get the most out of a 2-year program like this, it's important that we get a bit more disciplined in our own personal time and how we use it. Otherwise we'll really struggle. And where you'll really benefit is between those modules, which you'll have approximately a 2-month gap, I believe. If you're able to do follow-up reading, even just repeat reading of your notes from the weekend itself, it'll reinforce your learning. And that reinforcement is key. Looking at the same notes 2 or 3 times embeds it a little bit more than that one-off, and it'll just go in and disappear afterwards. So that element is important. And secondly, it'll help you when we come to assessment, because we'll come to assessment in a moment, but as you'll see, there'll be one module, and then in the next module we'll begin with a little bit of assessment of what we learned in the previous module, so having that revision will help. But at the same time, this course Sheikh Ibrahim has designed with our busy lives in mind. That's why it's not a weekly commitment, that's why it's not a weekday commitment. It's just giving up a day or two every 2 months, making it quite manageable for us. We don't have to give up our jobs or our commitments. So what I always say is Muslims, when it comes to time management, they have an interesting approach to it. The approach is by saying, I'll meet you at 7, so wait for me until 8. If I'm not there by 9, you can go at 10. So that's because we follow what's known as GMT. Who knows what GMT is? What's GMT? You might think it's Greenwich Mean Time. I like to call it generous Muslim time. We're very generous about the way we calculate our time. But if we think about how our life is spent, it's quite astounding the way our hours disappear in different directions. This is a piece of research that I came across where an average life was mapped out in this way. So you have here, the hours in a day, so there's 24 hours in a day, there's your 24. And this is the age range from 0 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 15-year-olds, up to 60, 65-year-olds. Now from 0 to 5, about sort of, you're just going through the different kind of waddling and toddling around of infancy. You've got about maybe more than 8 hours of sleep there, and your general routine that happens every day. You've got to go places, you've got to eat, you've got to pray, you've got to use the loo, you've got to wash and clean yourself, etc. Then from, say around 5 to 25, you're probably in education, so a lot of homework time and school time. But then when you're in your 20s, that education gets replaced by employment, unless you go into business. And you don't normally have homework, you've got free time. But as you can see, that ultimately that free time in your life amounts to that tiny percent to do something interesting with your life. And then you reach old age and senility. Now, if you analyze this, and if you consider a life, if we consider somebody who lives for 60 years, and that person sleeps 8 hours a day, which is normal, that person has actually spent 20 years of his life just sleeping. 20 years of his life just sleeping. Now, if you imagine that and think that you've reached your 60s, looking back at your life and thinking, what have I done with my life? And you're thinking, actually, 1/3 of it just went snoring away. So that gives us a perspective on, okay, what are we doing with the rest of our time? And according to this calculation, you've only got 8%. And you know what we fill that 8% with? Television, internet, chit-chat, Facebook, computer games, and what have you. How will we ever achieve anything in our lives? And as a result, it's important that if we have control over our time, we don't have a lot of it to do the things we want to do, in addition to the things we're often kind of forced to do. So we should use that very, very wisely. This is a well-known hadith, as a reminder, and this, again, for me, is a hadith that reminds me about how precious my time is. Take benefit of 5 before the 5. Your youth before old age, your health before your sickness, your wealth before your poverty, your free time before you're preoccupied, and your life before your death. So a reminder for us all with regards to time. Now, a quick sort of case study. There's no one called Muqtadir here, right? Okay. So this is a random name, but this is a particular life and somebody who perhaps is struggling a little bit with his time. So Brother Muqtadir is a father of 3 who works in the private sector. He has elderly parents and tends to be the one his family relies upon the most. He's also involved in a number of Islamic projects and activities. Monday is another typical day that he has a certain routine that he has to follow. His tasks involve fajr, breakfast, work, and of course there's prayers inside work, evening Islamic program meetings, then there's house errands, and then there's dinner, prayer, and last prayer and sleep. But what happens in practice? Well, Brother Muqtadir fails to get up for fajr. He went to sleep too late last night as he had to read through some very interesting emails. He eventually drags himself out of bed and realizes he needs to step out in 10 minutes or he's going to be late for work. His boss already had words with him about lateness on a few occasions, so he wasn't about to invite another conversation like that. So he skips breakfast, quickly uses a loo, jumps into his suit and steps out into his car and ends up taking 15 minutes rather than 10. Because he's running 5 minutes late, he speeds to work and manages to get in just on the dot. He spends the day running around in meetings, writing reports, and a long time checking both his work and personal emails. Come home time, he realizes he spent too long on his email and has another hour's worth of tasks to get through before he can leave work. He finally leaves and realizes he won't have time to pop in home because he's got that meeting to go to now because he's left work late. He was hoping he could pop in between the meeting. At that community meeting, he spends 2 hours, the first 45 minutes of which is social chit-chat. How you doing, bro? I haven't seen you in a long time, etc., etc. They then discuss and debate about the plans and ideas and finally decide that they'll make some decisions in the next meeting. Brother Muqtadir heads home and then he sees a text from his wife saying that they were out of milk and bread. He drove to a local shop that was open late. He seemed to know very well which shops would stay open late. He finally got home, feeling famished and tired. He went to his wife, dropped the shopping at her feet, then went to change his clothes. He looked around for his kids but found they'd all gone to sleep. He then went to the kitchen and found all the food that his wife had kindly prepared hours earlier and sat to eat. His wife quietly came and sat next to him and asked how he was. He didn't say much, except to say how it was a busy day and he was just too tired. He then decided to reach for the remote and switch the TV to see what the latest news was. His food finished and the news ended, and as he was about to get up, an interesting documentary followed, inviting him to stay tuned for this next show. He sat down just to watch it for 5 minutes as his wife left to check the kids. Half an hour later, he got out from the sofa, staggered to bed, quickly prayed Isha, lamented how late it was, and went to sleep feeling exhausted, irritable, and wondering what had he really achieved all day. Now, question is, have you come across any Brother Muqtadirs? Or maybe do you see any Brother Muqtadirs in your own life and circle? And you can relate this, brothers and sisters. Yes? Familiar? This is what life has become today. Very, very challenging and demanding, and it drains you. And as a result, if we don't have some control over our time, the little time that we can control, then it will completely take over and we really won't be able to achieve anything. And one thing that I often say is that great people in history, in Islamic history, who achieved things, also had 24 hours in their day. So as a result, you need to think about what are you doing with your 24 hours. So what I often do here is ask you, what do you think went wrong here? But because of lack of time, I'll just point it out. So obviously missing Fajr was a problem, sleeping too late is a problem, late for work, skipping breakfast, most important meal of the day, speeding to work, you shouldn't really be breaking the law, social chit-chat, the kufr law, as they say, although it's for our protection and the protection of society is also part of Sharia, but some of our, anyway. Decisions at the next meeting, so procrastinating and not progressing matters. Knowing which shops are open very late. Why is that a problem? But obviously this is a pattern, right? You know, his children effectively didn't see him all day because they went to sleep. So as the kids are concerned, they don't see their father. He didn't say much. So when you're coming home, you know, your wife hasn't seen you before for the whole day, and looking forward to conversation, but you don't have enough energy to engage in that conversation. Switching off the TV, bad move, very bad move. Sat down again, you know, 5 minutes turned to half an hour. Prayed the Isha quickly, and we know the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ criticizes those who pray like a pecking chicken. And this is what happens when you run out of time, that you don't give the due kind of attention to your prayers. Exhausted and irritable, is that what we give to our spouses at the end of the day, the most important people? So you can see how many things are going wrong in this life, and as a result, you know, sometimes you don't realize this is happening to us. So just to go through a few quick tips that might help you get a bit more control in your life, and as you're embarking on the Rashid course, it becomes all the more important to have that control. There's a few tools that I found very useful for people and for myself. Keeping a diary so that you can plan your day. You should have a diary so that you can, you know, at the start of the week, plan your week. What am I going to do? When am I going to do things? So if I know that there's a course coming up, then I say, okay, when I'm going to sort the shopping out in the house, okay, let me allocate it here. Now you've got online shopping. Allocate, you know, 15 minutes to do online shopping and get that ordered. And as a result, that time isn't used up to do that shopping. So the ways to structure your week, as they say, if you fail to plan, you've actually planned to fail. Cut out waste and non-value-add things. So there's an article called "Turn off your email and do some work," and that's really saying that sometimes email, whether it's personal or even work email, has become such that you're dictated. You're on the computer and you're just waiting for someone to email you, rather than you taking control. And there's ways to manage that. You can say that, okay, my work pattern is, when I go into work, the first hour I'll spend on email. Then the rest of the way I won't even look at it, and at the end of the day, the last hour, I'll look at my email again. But, you know, depending on the nature of, unless you're 999, then you don't have to respond within seconds to people. And if something is urgent, they'll come and find you. And as a result, it allows you to take control and decide, okay, these are my 2 or 3 priorities today, and that's how I'm going to work. Similarly, in your personal life, you can keep that in mind. Social media, that's a big time sapper. These are called time stealers. TV is time stealers. You know, a bit of brotherhood and interaction is okay, but constant kind of regular social chit-chat and getting together and wasting time is all a big time stealer. So what we need to do is reduce these things which are not really doing anything for our life and adding any value to our life. Developing certain personal qualities, and this is a wider discussion, but trying to reflect on what is my willpower like, what is my sense of discipline like. And sharpening your time perception. So when I do this at a longer course, I do an exercise called the time perception test, which I'd encourage you to go away at home and do. And what that is get somebody with a timer, and then that person will say, okay, go. And then you close your eyes, and then the person clicks, and then you have to then close your eyes and try and feel time. And when you think a minute has passed, you're not allowed to count from 1 to 60, but when you just feel that a minute has passed, you put your hand up, and they'll click, and then they'll tell you how much has actually passed. And that shows what is your embedded sense of time, your perception of time. If you do that exercise, a lot of people are, 2 minutes, 3 minutes pass, and then they put their hand up. And that's because their sense of time is not very precise. And that's why, they say, I'll be there in 10 minutes, and they come half an hour later, because they think it's been 10 minutes. Their time perception is very poor. If you want control of your time, you have to have a very precise perception of time. So do that test and then realize how far off you are, and then you need to then adjust and modify your inner perception of time. Enlist support for you to be able to manage your time better. So friends and partners in the endeavor. So now people who are in the journey with you to study, build that relationship with friends so that you can study together, work together, help one another. You have gym buddies, that motivates you to do that together. So that support's important. But the other thing is, sometimes if you are engaging in a project or activity as an individual, not necessarily say with your wife, there's a couple of you who have come, mashallah, with your other halves. But where you're doing something where your other half isn't involved, it's important to consult them, talk to them about what you're doing. so that you come to a mutual agreement about what you want to achieve in life. Otherwise, you are passionately pursuing a project, a work item, a career agenda. Your wife doesn't know what you're doing. All she knows is you don't give her any time. Or same if a wife is pursuing something, a husband feels my wife's never there for me. So as a result, that communication is important so that you both agree to support one another in your internal aspirations. That consultation and communication helps make that kind of supportive relationship. So that support is very, very important. And finally, of course, as Sheikh Fahim said, dua, because we have to ask Allah, after all of these interventions, we have to ask Allah to help us. Because if Allah doesn't grant our intentions and our wishes, then nothing will succeed. So we have to ask Allah for help. And there's a few verses of the Quran and Hadith relating to that. And Allah is always very, very, our creator of the nature, where we take one step to Him, He takes 10 towards us. And we should regularly ask Allah to help us try to achieve some of our goals. So these are a few quotes I'd like to finish up with for reflection from the realms of management. I like Einstein's one. He says the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So we can't possibly get a better control of our time if we carry on living the way we are. We have to change something fundamental. Inshallah, I'll leave you with those reflections. I've got my email there, so if along the course and along the way, if you find you're struggling to juggle, feel free to drop a line and we can talk about it and see how you can manage your time a little bit better, inshallah.